And welcome everyone to the Steel City Gridiron Report. My name is Nick Hedrick here of the Stranded Sports Podcast Network. It has been a while since we were here on the Steel City Gridiron Report after a pretty hot start. Ethan and I both dealing with a little bit of that holiday season flu, I guess we can call it. All sorts of things going around. We were feeling rather sick. Watching the Steelers also made us a little sick, I think, as it probably did most people, but wanted to hop on here and do this stream here tonight. Or if you're listening afterwards, get a podcast up for you to hear our thoughts. I know thousands of people were waiting to hear what we had to say about the last month or so of Steeler content. And we obviously wanted to bring that to you before their matchup with the Ravens on Saturday. Another Saturday game for the Pittsburgh Steelers here. Feels like they haven't played on a Sunday in a really long time. But nonetheless, a little Saturday night football action. No one ever had any issue with that, I don't think. So we'll hop into it here. Steelers and Ravens, 8 p.m. Saturday on Amazon Prime. It'll air locally here in Pittsburgh as well, I believe, on WPXI, which is the local NBC affiliate. But before we get into the Ravens talk, we're going to recap sort of the end of the Steelers' regular season, which, God bless you if you made it through. I hope you had a good holiday season. Let's say that right up front here. I hope you had a good holiday season aside from, the Steelers, because I know they ruined mine a little bit, but I lowered my expectations as they went, and I'm thankful to say they didn't totally ruin my Christmas. But nonetheless, it's been a rough stretch, perhaps to put it lightly, for the Steelers, and it all started with the Battle of Pennsylvania when they played the Philadelphia Eagles in Philadelphia, a place where I don't think they've won maybe since the inception of colored televisions. Maybe that's a little bit dramatic, but it's been quite some time since the Steelers won in Philadelphia. I don't think a lot of people thought they had a huge chance in this game, but at the time, I believe they were 10-3. And this was a game where it's like, okay, this is one of the best teams the NFC has to offer. If this is a legit team this year, this is going to be a game where they compete. And even if they do lose, we want to see something where we can know definitively that this team is different from the teams of the past couple years that kind of stumble their way into the playoffs. And yeah, Pittsburgh's a playoff team, but can they really beat a big dog or compete with a big dog? This was their chance to do that against Philadelphia. And this game was a total bummer, a stinker, a game that really, I think, deflated some people. Just a very sluggish start. Things weren't going too hot. The defense could not stop Philadelphia. Saquon went out briefly, I believe, for a quarter and a half or so, which you think they would have capitalized on that. But unfortunately, that is not what went down. Then Pittsburgh, of course, starts, getting back in it a little bit, has a promising drive going, and Najee Harris fumbles the football on the cursed pitch play. The new jet sweep, perhaps. Canada had the jet sweep. Arthur Smith seems to have some sort of infatuation with the halfback pitch. Ethan Morrison, my usual co-host, had the tweet that got over like 1,000 likes. I only envy him a little bit for that. About the reverse or the jet sweep, walked, so Arthur Smith's halfback tosses could run. And so, of course, there was finally a fumble on one. Usually they're just negative yardage, but unfortunately that Philadelphia game, Najee fumbled. And that was that. I'm not going to act like that totally ruined their chances of competing in that game. It was a huge blow, obviously, a gut punch. But, I don't know if they actually come back and win that game if he doesn't fumble. But it definitely, killed pretty much any chance they did have. And then Mike Tomlin put the final nail in that coffin by punting down 2 possessions in the fourth quarter, and the defense couldn't get off the field. It was a very slow, painful death. And something that maybe you wish on your worst enemy, but definitely not your favorite football team. It's just a really brutal game to watch. It was the first night I actually felt sick from the cold I mentioned earlier, and I was watching that game, forcing myself to stay awake, and Jesus Christ, I mean, it was painful to watch. It's painful to watch that. So the Battle of Philadelphia or the Battle of Pennsylvania, excuse me, goes to Philadelphia. But, TJ Watt got banged up in that game. They had some people out that game. The mentality towards the middle of the second half was just, okay, let's regroup. Let's get to Baltimore. We've done fairly well against Baltimore in recent memory. Lamar hasn't done super well against Pittsburgh. That was evident earlier this year when Pittsburgh beat Baltimore only with field goals. So all the mentality switched to, okay, let's just beat Baltimore. Let's win this division. Let's get it going. And that game, I think, was probably, I don't know if I want to say that's the toughest loss to swallow, toughest pill to swallow from that stretch, but it hurt because I think everyone knew that going 1-2 during that 3-game gauntlet that they had was pretty much a best case scenario. Like, they win one of those games, everyone's going to be really ecstatic. They clinched the playoffs, even though they lost to Philadelphia the week before. And so everything else now, we were just trying to win the division, get that better seed. And you only need to win one game to do that. So they lose to Philadelphia. They go to Baltimore. They beat Baltimore earlier in the year. And there's all this excitement now, right? Like, this is the game we're going to win during this really grueling part of our schedule. This is a winnable game. They're in the game. And then Russell Wilson just has 2 really bad turnovers. He finally, turns on the Jets, if you still want to call him that, at 36 years old. He's making this awesome run, and he takes the contact inside the 10-yard line, fumbles. Later in the game, throws a horrendous INT, went back for 6, and that took him out of the game. And once again, I'm not going to act like maybe those were the only reasons they lost, but man, it felt like that game was right there for the taking if Russell doesn't make those horrible turnovers. I don't know if I want to call them uncharacteristic, but it obviously were really ill-timed turnovers, killed a scoring drive, gave Baltimore points right back on the interception. So that game was tough, but that game felt like it was a winnable game. Of the 3 games in that gauntlet, I keep using the word gauntlet, but oh well, bear with me. It felt like the Baltimore one. There actually was a chance they were going to win that game. And that game, you kind of were like defeated, but it's like, okay, if our quarterback doesn't make 2 really boneheaded plays, we're in that game. Like, there's a chance you can win that game. There's something to grab onto there, even though Baltimore just used Derrick Henry way more than in that first game, right? I mean, they were playing through him. My fantasy team sure felt the effects of it as Derrick Henry just ran down their throat, and they really utilized him in that game. And I think that's very concerning as we kind of look at the snowy weather, perhaps, that's on the horizon for the game on Saturday night. If Derrick Henry can get churning the way he was in the second meeting of this year. And I think that's something that you have to keep an eye on as we move forward. But yeah, the Steelers-Ravens second meeting of the regular season really felt like the really big swing and miss of the regular season. It felt like they were right there. Russ has maybe his worst game as a Steeler. I don't know if you want to call the Cincinnati game to end the regular season maybe his worst game as a Steeler. But that Ravens game, those 2 turnovers were killer, and it was really difficult to watch because a ton of the blame went on him. And Pittsburgh doesn't have patience, the fan base that is, for play like that. So they were letting him have it, and it was tough to watch. Anyone who's listened to us throughout the course of the season knows I'm a huge Russell Wilson fan. And I was so happy when he came here. And again, I had the let's wait and see kind of mentality when he came over here. I wasn't expecting, prime Russell Wilson, but I was thinking he was going to do better than he did in Denver. And so watching all of that go down in that Ravens game, seeing him get the brunt of the blame, and deservedly so, it was tough to watch. But long story short, it really did feel like, yes, that was a horrible loss and a debilitating loss, but there was something about it where you're like, okay, like, we kind of pissed that game away. Then we get to Christmas Day. I was having a wonderful Christmas. Phenomenal Christmas. Second Christmas as a married man. Just really enjoying my day. And then I was like, all right, it's time to put on the Pittsburgh Steelers. You put on the Netflix broadcast. There's all the new flashy graphics. I had a friend working that game. He's telling me all the behind-the-scenes details. It's a ton of fun. Having a good time. I'm like, all right, let's watch this game. And I'm not going to really recount much of this game because I blocked it all out basically as it was happening. It was a horrendous performance, the Steelers-Chiefs game. This game, I think, is where all of the wind basically was knocked out of the proverbial sail of Pittsburgh. It was horrendous. There was all the talk online of, can the Steelers out black magic the Chiefs? and people were really buying into it. There were all the edits of Renegade online, on Twitter, on TikTok, on Instagram, and Mike Tomlin can outdo the Chiefs when it comes to that devil magic. And people really bought into the fact Pittsburgh was going to win this. The Chiefs played a bunch of games in a short period of time, just like Pittsburgh, albeit not as difficult of a stretch as Pittsburgh had. And people were really convinced the Chiefs were going to lose to the Steelers, at least in Pittsburgh. Maybe not anywhere else in the world, but at least in the 4-1-2, people were like, okay, this is going to be a really shocking win for us, and we're going to right the ship. And it wasn't. It was horrendous. They went down early. They never truly seemed to be in the game, and it was an awful Christmas because the family we were with are not huge football fans. So I have to explain things to them sometimes. The very casual fans are like, "Aren't the Steelers like in the playoffs? Aren't they good? Like what's this?" And I'm like, "This is the experience. This you've heard of the Jimi Hendrix experience. This is the experience of watching Pittsburgh Steeler football. Like there's going to be games like this where you're just like, what on earth are they even doing out there?" And it was a frustrating game. And as I said when we started, they didn't ruin my Christmas. They didn't get the benefit of ruining my Christmas, but I did sit there with my pie and think, damn, that really sucks. This is a difficult game to watch, and it's on Christmas, and I need to put that out of my mind because I just can't let them take this day from me. I cannot let them take this day away from me. And they tried, but oh well. Oh well. What do you have here? Tyler Gallo says, Nick, do you think the Steelers will be extra juice for a division rivalry game in the playoffs? Take care, TG. I hope they are. They're saying they are. I was going to wait to answer this until we actually get to the breakdown of that game, but we'll do it now for our good pal Tyler Gallo. Yeah, I would hope they would be. If they're not, then I don't know what the hell's wrong with them. There have been times before where I thought this team would be super amped up, and then they go out and lay a goose egg against a team with like 2 wins. I thought they'd go out there and beat the brakes off of the Browns the first time they met. That didn't happen. Last year, I thought they'd go out and beat the crap out of Arizona and New England, and they lost both of those games. So it's kind of difficult to predict when this team's actually going to, come out and, beat the brakes off somebody or look motivated or like they've ever played football before. That certainly wasn't the case against Cincinnati, who went right down the field and scored on the opening drive. I can't remember the exact statistic that was up there, but essentially Cincinnati's never done well on their opening possession against Pittsburgh. It was something 24 was the number. I know it was last 24 games, last 24 first quarters. Well, that'd be the same thing. But regardless, they were talking all about how they struggled on their opening drive against Pittsburgh, and they went right down the field and scored. And when I talked about the Chiefs game taking the wind out of the sails, this was the moment where it just felt like, oh dear God, like this game is not going to go as swimmingly as their first meeting this season. Like this is going to be a very difficult watch. And I had one of the best local pizzas I've ever eaten in my life. So I was eating my pizza, once again, trying not to let the Pittsburgh Steelers ruin my day. And you probably don't care about that, but alas. So it was a painful game. The offense did nothing. And I'm not going to tell you anything new in this analysis. Like they played this team a month ago and scored 40 points, had 400 yards. And they go out a month later and Russ has like 40 yards at the end of the first half. He had like 3, 4, 5 completions. Like it was insane. I did not know what I was watching. It looked like I was watching a bunch of guys who had gotten lobotomies over the past month and they didn't know what they were doing. And it was a painful, painful watch, probably more painful than watching this, but maybe I'm giving myself too much of a pat on the back. It was crazy. It was crazy to see the night and day difference. And I think that's some of the people. This isn't going to be like a let's evaluate Mike Tomlin kind of thing. That'll be an off-season thing. But I think that's a major gripe that people have with Tomlin. And I realize how lucky we've been to have Tomlin in certain scenarios where he makes, chicken salad out of chicken, what. But you also have to sit back and be like, how don't you have your team motivated for this game? This is a winnable game. You're on a 3-game skid, and this is how they come out and look. It was asinine for them to have that performance against Cincinnati. It would have been a great win, too, because Cincinnati was streaking. They just played for their playoff life against Denver, a fellow playoff team the week before, and were in a dogfight, and they won that game, right? They won that game. It was an impressive victory. No one would have wanted to play Cincinnati if they made it into the playoffs. Some people think that's why Kansas City tanked so hard when they had their backups in this past week against Denver, right? No one wanted to play Cincinnati. They have a Triple Crown winner in Jamar Chase. They have Hendrickson leading the league in sacks. They have Joe Burr right there as a quarterback, MVP conversation kind of guy, even though they probably weren't going to make it into the playoffs. The conversation from his season, which he had such a good season, was that if they finished 9-8 and made it into the playoffs, do you have to give him the MVP? Like, Cincinnati would have been a great win to end the season. They had just beaten them in a high-scoring affair a month ago. They gave up, 19 points to them on Saturday night? You would have thought they would have won with ease if you were told that a month ago, because the defense didn't have a good outing against Cincinnati the first time they played. So aside from that first drive, the defense was in some tricky situations. They didn't let it get out of hand. They kept it close the way the defense is always, required to keep the game close. And they just couldn't do anything on offense. They didn't do anything on offense till the end of the game. They're playing up tempo. They go down the field. They score. They trust the defense. They get the ball back. And it's like, oh my God, they're going to do a Steeler thing where they somehow win this game. I don't think anybody, even the biggest Steelers optimist there was, I don't think would have been happy if they beat Cincinnati on a field goal at the end of that game and thought, wow, like that was good. Like, we showed grit. We won that game. Like, I think it would have been like, yeah, we won. Yeah, we have a little bit of an easier playoff game, but like, holy crap, do we look lost? There was no really redeeming quality of that Bengal game, win or lose, by the time the game got towards the end. Like, if they didn't magically make it down there and Boz kicked the game-winning field goal, there was still really nothing to grab onto other than, like, the defense finally looks pretty competent finally after a rough stretch, right? But alas, they lose. I don't know. Again, I keep trying to give Russell Wilson the benefit of the doubt. The play where he could clearly have run out of bounds and he just pile drives into a dude and they have to burn the timeout was crazy. George Pickens had a horrendous game. Again, this is me telling you nothing really new, but George Pickens had a terrible game. Connor Hayward finally had a really good play. They don't use him as much on offense anymore. He's gotten ragged on for the way they were trying to utilize him before, and he made a phenomenal heads-up play on that punt. Like, there were a couple redeeming things to take away from it, I guess, but like, I don't know what the game plan was. I read somewhere where Tomlin was basically saying, we're not going to be able to go out and do what we did to them again, so let's just try to run the ball. That clearly wasn't working, but they tried. They really did try. And I'm still baffled now. It's Tuesday? It's like 3 days later. I still don't understand how they can look that lost after they beat this team and had the best offensive performance maybe in years that they've had in their win against Cincinnati earlier this season. And then they come out and do that. I can keep telling you how confused I am, and I genuinely mean it. Like, I can't put it into words how deflating that was to watch, because it really was like, okay, we're going to play Cincinnati. Their defense isn't too good, and we're going to get this thing figured out, right? Like, this is going to be a good confidence-boosting game for the Steelers' offense. And it was not that. It was not that at all. This offense is putrid going into the playoffs. Absolutely putrid. The defense, thankfully, kind of righted the ship, right? But the offense is horrendous. Bishop Sycamore might keep the offense from crossing midfield at this point. Like, this is bad. This is like last year predictability levels of bad. Run, halfback toss, screen pass, a run, halfback toss. It's 3rd and 4, and we're going to throw it 50 yards down the field. It's so predictable. They don't throw it short unless it's a screen or a dump to, Freiermuth somewhere. They never do a quick, 5-yard route. They never do anything different. And that's why the offense has gone from 25th to 23rd overall in offense between the 2 years. And somehow Arthur Smith is allegedly still gauging interest in head coaching positions. That'd be a good Jets move. That'd be a really on-brand Jets move. I bet Woody Johnson's son really thinks that would be a good move since he's allegedly running the team. I kid. But now we'll go and take a look a little bit at the issues with the Steelers. I've kind of already gone off script here and, dove into some of these in my complaints earlier, but Russell Wilson's pocket presence is abysmal. He stands there and waits to get hit. He's not and I don't get it. And this is a little off the cuff. Like this isn't a totally well-developed thought. This is me hoping I find it along the way. I'll be totally honest with that. He stands there and just takes it. But then when he does like take off, like he looks very like mobile still. Not obviously as mobile as he used to be, but like he's not a liability. Like, someone like Aaron Rodgers or Kirk Cousins where you're like, "Oh, that guy can't go anywhere." Like he can still move. And the line's terrible, and so he's getting that pressure immediately and he doesn't move. Like there's no real movement in the pocket. It's very confusing to watch because like I said, when he does take off, which is, sporadically now, he like has a little zip to him. Like he's not the Flash, he's no Lamar Jackson, no Josh Allen, but like he moves well. But when that pressure's coming, he just waits and like freaks out and he takes the hit. Or sometimes he like gets the ball and immediately he haws it out of bounds and there's like no chance, which I guess is better than the sack, but it's crazy to me just how little pocket awareness there is from him and how little it's developed as he's gotten deeper in, because that was like a knock I've had on him right from the beginning of his time as the starter, and he just hasn't really gotten any better. And before, when they're winning games, it's like, oh, well, whatever. But now it's, he's just standing there, letting Hendrickson ragdoll him. I don't know. That concerns me. The offense can't move the ball anyway. They really can't. They've looked horrendous. I just talked about this. So I won't spend much more time on it, but they look terrible. They look totally lost on offense. And thankfully, once again, the defense is stepping up after that Bengal game. I feel a little bit better about the defense, but we'll see. TJ Watt, I don't think, has had a sack in 4 weeks. He had that really nice play against Cincinnati that ended up getting negated because Trice held, but he has not made a huge play in what feels like forever. And people are noticing, people are getting mad, people want him to be traded, what have you. I don't want to go that far. Like that seems a bit of a stretch. TJ Watt and his injury history. It's deep in the season. They've played a lot of tough games. He's definitely playing a little banged up. That's obviously something, the great players are supposed to play through. And like, I'm a 5'9" dude sitting here talking about this who's never played football at a high level. So that's rich of me to say, he needs to suck it up and play through it. But like, it's understandable why he isn't as big of a factor as he has been with everything he has to deal with, but he needs to do something. You can't have the best player on your defense be non-existent in the toughest stretch of your schedule heading into the playoffs. Tomlin's 0 for 5 in his last 5 playoff games. Lamar Jackson's playoff stats are 6 touchdowns, 6 interceptions in 6 playoff games, including 10 points in the AFC title game last year against Kansas City. I believe his QBR is around 75, 78 or so. So those are the 2 big storylines, the 2 big overlying narratives going into Saturday's game. Does Tomlin finally get a playoff win, get this team out of the first round, and can Lamar Jackson finally put together a playoff run in a year where Lamar Jackson once again is making a strong case to be the MVP? This is a big game for Lamar Jackson, right? People say he can't beat Pittsburgh. He did that to end their 2 games in the regular season, right? He did well in that game at home against Pittsburgh. He got that win. That's obviously not going to be enough to break that stigma that people have of he can't beat Pittsburgh. But now he gets a chance to do it in the playoffs at home when Baltimore's streaking. Baltimore's 4-0 after their bye in week 14, and nothing's really been that close, right? They beat Pittsburgh. I know Houston's struggling hard. They have a lot of injuries. CJ Stroud's obviously feeling the effect of not having a ton of receivers at his disposal. The line's banged up, right? They beat Houston 31-2. They beat the Browns. They beat Pittsburgh. They beat the Giants, which congratulations on beating the Giants. But they're 4-0, and they've won those games in not particularly close fashion. Baltimore is the anti-Pittsburgh right now. They are on all cylinders. They had guys in that game last week just proving points. That's how Zay Flowers got injured. Looks like he might not be in that game. against Pittsburgh, so that's a little bit of a blessing for Pittsburgh, but I don't think that's going to be enough. We'll get to that in a second. This is the tale of two teams. Pittsburgh is stumbling into the playoffs, crawling. I don't know if they beat anybody in the playoffs from the AFC side. I think if they could have beaten Houston in what would have probably been a horrendous game. They would have beaten Houston. I don't know if they would have beat Denver. I really don't. Denver's defense is locked in. Bo Nix is miles better than he was when Pittsburgh played him earlier this season. The Chargers, Pittsburgh beat too. Justin Herbert was banged up going into that game, got hurt in that game as well. Don't think they would beat the Chargers. There's a chance they beat Baltimore, though. There's a chance any given Sunday, right? In this case, I guess any given Saturday, that they beat the Ravens. They beat them in a Pittsburgh Steeler style earlier this season where they beat them with only field goals. They beat them when the offense wasn't clicking before. The question now is, can the defense limit Baltimore enough to where Pittsburgh can win this slow rolling dogfight once again? Because they weren't able to do that their second meeting. And again, that's because Russell Wilson's turning the ball over in that game. Defense didn't look super good that game either, but it obviously wasn't, helped any by Wilson with that fumble and that interception. Can the defense keep this game close? It's a storyline we've heard numerous times before watching the Steelers. It's what they did basically Kenny Pickett's entire tenure. That's not a knock on Kenny Pickett. That's just the style of game they played, right? The defense keeps it close. The offense has to have like one coherent drive, and the defense will either force a turnover or get them the ball back, and we'll find some way to win this game without scoring 20 points, right? And this year it felt like that wasn't going to be how they were going to win games. This was the year where everyone was like, this team is for real this time. It's different this year. And then they got to that gauntlet, and it didn't look a lot different this year. And I know going into this season, everyone said we just need to be in a good spot before we play Philly, Baltimore, Kansas City. And then they struggled in those games, and everyone was jumping off going, oh, well, that's it. We suck. As if we didn't know that was going to be a tough stretch of that schedule. But that Cincinnati game last Saturday was damning. The fact that that's how they looked against Cincinnati, once again, a team that they had a very good performance against a month prior. A very good performance a month prior. So I don't know. There's not much confidence in my heart that this game's going to go well. Can the defense keep it close? It's as simple as that. If Baltimore scores over 20 points, Baltimore wins this game. Vegas is giving Baltimore 9.5 points. I think that's a little aggressive, but I can also, it's hard to argue because Pittsburgh can't score right now. 9.5 points, interesting line in my opinion. There might be snow in this game. Sounds like there might be a band going through at that time. And people are going, oh, that's good for Pittsburgh. That's real good for Pittsburgh. Is it though? The same team that lost to Cleveland in the snow, and then some of its own players were saying if we didn't play in the snow, we would have beat them. Now we're going to go, oh, this gives us a better chance because it's in the snow. I don't know about that one. I don't think so, Tim, as they would say in Home Improvement, right? So I don't know. I don't know if that snow really does make a difference. And I think the snow means more Derrick Henry. And based on how that second game went, I don't know if that's a good thing. I really don't. The running game last week wasn't too hot either from the Pittsburgh side. So we'll see. My prediction for this game is that Baltimore wins, and I do think it's a boring slugfest of a game, and it's going to make the loss even more painful for Pittsburgh. I think Baltimore wins this one 20-13. I do think Pittsburgh keeps it somewhat close, but I don't think they get that win. And I think there's a lot of questions going in to the offseason. Do any of those questions get answers or any of those things addressed? We'll talk about that as the offseason rolls on. We will talk about that in due time. And I do believe there is a path to victory for Pittsburgh, right? Pittsburgh could win this game, and I don't think anyone in their heart believes Pittsburgh's going to win this game. But it's not like it's out of the question, right? They look awful, but they've surprised people before. I mentioned that Tomlin voodoo magic people thought that was going to be on display against the Chiefs. That could happen here, right? Like it Pittsburgh finds a way at times. This current version of this team, I don't know if they could find a way to beat ITT Tech, right? But they could beat Baltimore. They could win this game. Is Lamar a choker in the playoffs? More so than is Tomlin a choker in the playoffs and can't get this team past the damn first round? We'll find out. We'll find out. I think Lamar has a chip on his shoulder. I think Lamar's pissed that people are kind of writing in Josh Allen as the MVP over him. And I think this is a year where Baltimore just wants to go on an absolute tear in these playoffs. And I think it's achievable this time based on how hot this team is right now. And I think that spells doom for Pittsburgh. Might not be a lot of joy in Pittsburgh after this game. If you want that, allegedly, maybe go to Fox Sports 1, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens on Saturday night when the Steelers play the Baltimore Ravens. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll be breaking down this game next week. Appreciate everyone who tuned in. Don't have a total view count on this screen, but saw decent numbers in there, so we do appreciate that. It's been a while since I've done anything solo in a while, so thanks for bearing with me here, and we'll see you again very soon here on the Steel City Gridiron Report. Take care of yourselves. Enjoy your Tuesday night.